Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Once again, welcome to the show. Rich?
Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
I'm terrific-ish, and it's a
All right,
lovely Friday.
I think you're terrific every day. Isn't that true? Well, okay. Anyway.
Don't butter my buns. So we got a really awesome topic today. I think everyone's been waiting for it. It's a biggie. We partially covered it before when we had a guest on the show talking about part of it. But this is more of an overview and an esoteric rapprochement to the ethos. So without further ado, past life regression and soul trauma healing.
We have an ado. The ado is the mental wealth tip for our...
But first, the mental wealth tip of the day.
Where's my drum roll? Oh, there it is. The mental wealth tip of the day has to do with substance abuse.
Ooh,
do you know
substances?
Well, Mark is the local expert on this. Substance abuse is the one illness, the one disease, that one of the symptoms is it tells you you don't have it. There are other mental health problems, schizophrenia, even, garden variety depressions, where you can deny that you have it. But that's different. It's more like not being aware of it. This is, you don't have that. You don't have that.
Whatever it is, it's not that.
That's right. It's somebody else's fault.
Very intriguing. So what do you do about that?
Well, what do you do about it is you try to get as much leverage as you can to get them to look at it. There's a riddle that goes along with this. How many doctors does it take to change a light bulb?
All of them?
Well,
the light bulb's got to want to change.
There you go. I guess it's how many shrinks does it take to change a light bulb? But the light bulb's got to want to change. And usually the only way they will is if life is kicking their butts, and they come kicking and screaming, or the family is, But, my take on it is that there's two rules of treating addiction. Rule number one is young people die. And rule number two is doctors can't change rule number one.
That has saved me on more than one occasion.
And I hope people take us seriously when we tell them how dangerous addiction is.
Thanks for the mental wealth tip of the day. I feel wealthier already.
Yeah, well, I like, people have said mental health. I like mental wealth better. I don't know why. It just sort of appeals to me that, there's treasures.
It engenders more excitement.
Well, it's like that the mind is a treasure.
Right.
I like that better. So speaking of that.
So the mind.
Do you know, I think you do know, that I technically met you because of past life regression.
This is true.
Because Brian Weiss, who is the international expert and who was, I would say, not a friend, but he was friendly to me. He referred your mom to me. And in fact, I was so thick, she said I was referred by Dr. Weiss. I said, who's he? I don't know any Dr. Weiss. She goes, well, he seems to know you. Oh, that Dr. Weiss. Okay. So, been around past life regression for about 30 years now. It's fascinating. Even more than that. I think I became acquainted with it around 1990.
Also, a key reason that I married my wife, on our second date, we were both reading Many Lives, Many Masters concurrently. And
it's a terrific book.
One of those moments.
Yeah. And actually, what happened was I met this guy in Phoenix. Phoenix is like a hub of hypnotherapists, and he was a really interesting dude. He was a construction worker who did hypnosis, and he had this very deep voice. You should see Dr. Wise, Richard. You should see Dr. Wise. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. But so when I finally called Brian Weiss's office, of course, the secretary figured I'm just another Yahoo, So I said, no, I want to talk to you. No, write him a letter. And I said, look, I want to find out how he doesn't get sued for this. He's on the phone in a second. And then he started referring me people, and it was one of the great fortuitous events of my life because I got to meet your mom, and then I got to meet you. And
Well, the interesting thing about it is it's been around a while.
oh yeah,
Um, and we're going to talk about what it is in a second. But I mean, the initial disclaimer is it's a little bit controversial in that despite a large percentage of people believing not only in life after death or a god or souls or more specifically reincarnation of the soul, despite all of that, there's still a lot of pushback about whether or not past life regression is ethical. And I find that kind of humorous. On one hand, I kind of see where they're coming from. What's the hard evidence basis of it? But quite frankly, what's the hard evidence basis of a lot of successful types of psychotherapy? And the proof is in the pudding. You know, people that undergo this level of therapy of it's a gentle form of hypnotherapy, they have profound changes. That is something you just cannot argue with, and to me proves the ethics, if that's even a question or ongoing question. But
well,
let's
I never got an address I could look up or a phone number or anything like that. But what I found is that the dynamics were uncannily on target. And my first introduction to this was me. And some of the experiences I had, and I've been regressed many, many times. And yeah, with hypnosis, for people who don't know hypnosis, part of hypnosis is playing along, letting your imagination go with where it needs to go. But there were several of them. There were three in particular. They were so real to me. They were incredibly real, and they explained so much about where my psyche was in the present. So I look at them as metaphors.
let's define it better, because for the people
Okay.
who aren't familiar with it, it's a gentle form of hypnotherapy which takes an individual back through time, essentially to their previous lives or incarnations, by accessing memories and experiences that are normally hidden by the conscious mind or thought to be subconscious. I would also argue that there is a non-linearity of time here. You can actually go into future lives too. That people don't like to talk about that as much, but if we're able to remember these past traumas, depending on the actual mechanism that we're accessing that information, why should going forward in time being any different?
Well,
um,
because of what Yoda said. In motion, the future always is. The thing is, if I say we define regression first, any mental movement in back in time is a regression. We had lunch a little while ago, and I can think back and remember what I had. That's a regression. So, and with hypnosis, you can take people back into earlier times of their life, and it's just really kind of an inner focus of attention.
Well, you can do that, but arguably you're using their memory, their mind, their brain to access those traumatic experiences in an attempt to reintegrate them.
I
What
didn't think
happens when
lunch
you
was that
transcend
traumatic,
that
but
body into
okay.
another brain, into a previous life?
Well, the idea here is that what you're attaching to, and of course we are going to look at soul trauma healing later in this broadcast. Um, that we're looking into the soul. That the soul, in my definition, the soul is the seat of memory, and the memory of all the lifetimes. Now, all the major religions, that includes Christianity and Judaism and Islam, have parts of their religions that believed in reincarnation. There were sects of Christians that called the Cathars. Up until the 12th century, they still had reincarnation as part of the liturgy. In fact, it was not taken out of the Christian liturgy until around the year 300 in the Council of Origen in Constantinople. And that was a political move. Um, there you go. Shameless plug. Huh? Oh, there you go. Um, Kabbalah in the Jewish faith, the Kabbalah talks about the transmigration of souls. Um,
Most religions, I don't even think they need to be major, definitely talk about migration of the soul and believe in the
and, and
disembodiment of our cadre, if you
and you
will.
know, the to me, I mean, look, this is just a personal way of looking at the world. How can we explain, like, if a young child dies? How do we explain that in terms of anything? How does their soul get an opportunity to experience Earth life? What does it mean? To me, that's the proof of reincarnation, is that sometimes young people die, and sometimes they die to provide lessons for other people. How do we as outsiders, and I've had to deal with both friends and patients who've lost children, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. But if you
Well,
look at it from a certain perspective, why did that soul come down? In fact, one of my friends had a sister who was profoundly mentally retarded. And one of my other dearest friends is an astrologer. So I brought the chart to him, didn't tell him anything about it. He looked at the chart and he said, "This is the chart of a spiritual master." And this person was profoundly mentally retarded. My friend said, "We always suspected that." Okay, so why would a person choose this? Well, they're giving to others where their soul needs a certain kind of purification. Who knows? The bottom line is that if you don't want to believe that there are past lives or the reincarnation, that's fine. You can still use the technique,
and
believe it
it's
or not.
still helpful.
Yeah, because you're accessing a metaphor. There's no there. I mean, I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the technique provides emotional healing for people. There is no evidence that you're accessing a lifetime that you can document, which is
Well, I've got some stuff coming up here that might just
really, well, I thought it was, the stuff that Dr. Stevenson did. That's what you're probably going to talk about.
yeah.
But he didn't do regressions. He actually investigated cases of little kids spontaneously. Remember, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what you said about the mental retardation and the kind of what was that, a yogi or spiritual master
Yeah.
being assigned that body, kind of touches into the overarching point of the non-ordinary mind series, which is getting people thinking about consciousness, whether that's their inner landscape or drives that motivate them, or in this case, we're talking about subconscious, or maybe even this is recorded on an etheric body level. But life is so busy today that there's noise everywhere, and our brain's constantly filtering out all of this information. But these memories seem to exist below, in a subconscious state, below conscious awareness of them. And one of the things that you can do is bring out of the subconscious, bring forth, whether it's a veridical or metaphorical past life lesson, memory, to work on. Because, like we were saying before, that idea of reincarnation is not new. It's Everyone is familiar with the concept. It's existed well over 3,000 years, as far back as I could research. The Babylonians, Sumerians, it goes way back. Of course, I'm a big fan of Norse mythology. It's very drippy with that paganistic interpretation. um, but it's a very universally and widely held spiritual belief that each of us goes through these reincarnation series of lifetimes here at Earth School, or whatever you want to call it. And the purpose of Earth School is spiritual growth and your soul's development, right?
Because everything's going slower here. It's more dense, takes a little longer, you have more time to think about it. It's funny because people say, well, is reincarnation, or is the past life therapy, or is it a fact? Okay. It's funny how that works. It wouldn't have been a fact if I hadn't actually experienced it. For me, and I think I've been regressed to maybe 15 different lifetimes, but most of them felt, like I was playing along or I was just using my imagination. But there were three that was so real. And in fact, one of them, I was describing a scene in the Southwest, and as an Indian medicine healer, and the therapist said to me, "Have you ever been to Sedona?" I said, "No." "Have you ever seen it?" "No." "You just described it."
Hmm.
So when I went out there, I mean, obviously, I was a little jaded, but when I went out there, it really did feel home. I felt so comfortable there. And, maybe I would have felt it anyway, but it was really uncanny to have that kind of experience. And I had one other experience. And, all once again, depending on what you believe, where I was regressed to a lifetime on Atlantis as a scientist priest. And the head of the high priest of the Temple of Beauty. And so then
Were you
about a year later, I moved to Florida, and I was when I was in California. I moved to Florida, and I hadn't told anybody here because I met a whole new group of people. I didn't know of anybody. They'd sort of send me to the loony bin if I started talking about it. And I started doing some past life regressions with people, and this one person describes almost dot for dot what I had seen. So I tried to play it real cozy. I didn't let on. And I said, "Do you recognize anybody in that scene as being important in your current lifetime?" And she said, "I recognize you." So I said, "Well, okay, that's fine. What do they call me? What's my name?" She had it exactly as I had heard it in my regression. And I almost fell down, I was like, wow. So that's the closest I can get to some stronger data that this is real. But my experience of it and how it changed me, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and that's what matters to me more than anything is that healing no matter what. First doing no harm, but two, identifying a problem and what regardless of the mechanism, and then actually to being able to have therapeutic techniques. In this case, we'll talk about them a little specific to this, that really provides that healing. And
If you think about some of the Gestalt techniques, where the empty chair technique, what would you say to yourself as a
yeah,
young person? All right, so what you do is you process whatever happened in this lifetime, and then you say, well, what advice do you have for Richard in the present? And that's where the how is this affecting current functioning? To me, it
yeah,
always
it's
comes back
almost
to
it's
how, yeah.
oh, good.
No, how is it affecting your present relationships, your career, your mental health?
It reminds me of like soul fragmentation, which we're going to talk about in the soul trauma section. But, you mentioned Ian Stevenson before and evidence. To me, I was so amazed by that man and him dedicating his life in the methodical, empirical approach, to these kids, mainly kids, but over 3,000 cases he
But well,
documented.
he is I mean, I'm real clear that he has the best data that shows that reincarnation is a real thing. But even he said that he felt that past life regression therapy was an artifact of the unconscious and that it didn't give you the real stuff. I'm okay either way. I'm not.
Well, but at the same time, he was providing, evidence, which was showing, not only are there kids that seem to remember their past lives and argue with their parents about who they are or how old they
Yeah.
are or what happened to them. They may have a memory of their death, but he published hundreds of papers. I
Oh,
think
he was
14
just
books
brilliant stuff
on
too.
reincarnation. I did my summer fellowship up there in the room full of his work, and it was so powerful, just the energy in these files, the
Well,
amount of
he
40
would
years
look
of
at
his life.
he would take the spontaneous statements of kids, look at their birthmarks,
Yeah,
and be able to correlate that with how that person who would be in a nearby village. He'd go to the village, he'd find out that like it was a birthmark here, the person had an arrow in his throat. I mean,
yeah, they correspond physical injuries to birthmarks, and they could be transferred from one life to another. You know, you may carry a birthmark through more than one life if you don't get the healing as part of this packet called your current lifetime.
You know, and
Memories, emotions,
it
all
certainly
kinds of stuff.
begs the issue of what is time. You know, and I used to wrestle with this myself because, you know, I felt like all of time was in the instant. Well, are the lifetimes in lockstep with each other, or are they all sort of like flowers in a meadow, all existing at once but not touching each other? And, you know, in my own crazy mind, I decided it had to be both, and then I stopped thinking about it all that much.
What about those kids that describe places kind of like the Atlantis, or they describe family members like, oh, I've got to get back to my spouse, like that movie Somewhere in Time, or what about when they're speaking a foreign language, or worse, a dead language that no one on planet Earth speaks? Those are a
It's pretty
lot
amazing,
harder to
and I
explain.
just think it. Once again, it's back to the whole purpose of our show is to expand people's curiosity about consciousness. You know, I had a patient who was really on the edge of a breakthrough in consciousness, but instead, because it scared her, she would drink. So I came up with one of the best lines I ever had. I said, "Look, you're being offered an exploration of the mysteries of human consciousness, and you're settling for a cheap bottle of wine at CVS." She never forgot it. She hassled me about that line for quite some time.
That's good. That's a
But I
zinger.
think it was the truth because it was scary to her to go into that space. She was told that this was of the devil, that if you did this stuff, if you believed this stuff, but I mean, even Jesus talked about many mansions.
Hmm.
I think he was referring to reincarnation when he said that.
Hmm. Makes sense.
So,
And like you were saying before, the therapeutic benefit is undeniable, and it could be anything from reconnecting with the past life experience or memory, which is hyper vivid. It's almost like a lucid dream or a near death experience. You cannot talk these people out of, oh, that was a hallucination, it was this, it was that. But there's a certain aha in remembering a previous life. There's something very powerful just in and of, and therapeutic in and of that by itself, but much deeper than that, it can help you understand why you feel the deep connection to certain places. We've talked about this on the show. Some people are drawn to Italy. You know, you're drawn to Sedona, I'm drawn to Norway. Why?
I actually, this wasn't a regression therapy, but when I was in Beijing, I was at the Emperor's Palace, and I knew where everything was. It was bizarre. And I remember, you know, my partner at the time said to me, "You know where everything is in this place. What's going on?" I said, "I don't know, but it feels like home to me." And I was always drawn to China. To me,
Mm,
China was a big deal. Maybe it was the Chinese food. I don't know. But yeah. And people will talk about being connected to certain places,
mm-hmm.
you know, in a way
Or
that's,
people.
yes, without a doubt, people.
You know, you explore your past life, or even with your current soulmate, which we're going to talk about soul contracts a little bit when we get onto soul trauma healing. But identifying physical ailments that no doctor has been able to figure out, you may have carried it your whole life. It could be a birth or congenital thing, or it could be an unexplained thing that unresolved emotions that you've carried through into this lifetime, create these fears, beliefs that affects the body, the trauma. We've talked about trauma getting stored physically in the body, and then actually doing something about it, embracing and acknowledging those key lessons, life lessons,
Well, I
from
think if
another vantage point, this
people
autoscopic view.
look around their lives, what's important to you? I mean, for example, do you really think that Mozart, who could write symphonies at age 6, you think he just showed up? I mean, he must have been working on it for many lifetimes. In fact, I think about what people said to me when I started my career. You already know how to do this. You have a knack for it. Well, in the regressions, I found that I did do it in other times. And you know, I was fascinated as a kid and even to this day with pyramids. I like pyramids.
Pyramids.
I used to have bunches of them. Well, lifetime in Egypt. Atlantis was about pyramids. Um, to me, you can glean certain things, and it's really more about self-awareness. What makes you tick? How can you be more aware? And I think that whether you believe in reincarnation or not, and obviously I do, um, the self-awareness that comes out of the dynamics is what makes the day. So you'll have this experience. You can call it a waking dream if you like. I don't care what you call it. Whatever comes to you is worth looking at least in my experience and the experience of my patients. And I used to do a lot of this. I've gotten more into the mind-body therapy now, but I found that people could get really valuable life lessons from it. And I guess that's really what it's
Well,
about.
at the very least, it's sort of like a mental Rorschach test, you know,
Yes.
but on a unconscious level, even as opposed to soul trauma healing, which is slightly different. Um, but it's equally as powerful, I think, and it's interesting.
I think
Well,
there's a lot of overlap too.
yeah, there is a lot of overlap. Let me give a definition here
Go for it.
of any physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual experience that's created a chaotic or dysfunctional impact on your energy field that is creating imbalance, stasis, or chaos in some way in your life. That's a pretty good definition. That's one of the best definitions I ran across that shows just like our skeleton is an integral part of our body, it's a layer, if you will, of our body. Our vasculature is a layer, our nervous system's a layer, the energetic field that the nervous system generates itself can be a layer, whether that's astral injection through the pineal or an etheric body, that being a layer. They're all connected. They're all connected. So if you have a trauma and you damage these layers, the normal growth, development, whatever that takes is interrupted. It's there could be a chink in the normal flow of that. And that could be a single traumatic event, right? It could be a major crossroads or an illness. It could be from abuse or an accident or maybe an unexpected life detour event. And it creates this upheaval, and it's got to be significant, right? When she agreed, it's got to have emotional, spiritual power to be able to either the soul's going to process it or spit it out or release fragments of it into other dimensional spaces, which we talked about a little bit with Elizabeth Benson and what the type of work she does.
And the story that your subconscious comes up with is uncanny. At least for me, I was regressed to 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, and I saw Jesus up on the cross, and I was one of his followers, and I literally felt my soul crack when he died.
Your soul took a crap?
Cracked.
Oh,
Like,
crap.
I guess you could say crap. It was not pleasant.
Your
But
kundalini took a crap.
it explained a lot of how I felt about spirituality and religion in the present. And if I was going to do spiritual healing with people, that I had to understand whatever that was. To me, it looked real. It felt real. Everything about it was real.
There's a really, I guess, important piece we haven't brought into it yet. And it's not so much that we're reincarnated souls coming to Earth School and probably all kinds of other planets all over the universe, known universe. Let's just say stuff happens at us, which traumatizes us, and then we got to fix it, right?
Right.
It's a lot more than that, because the whole concept that we talked about on the Alyssa Benson show was soul contracts, that actually before you enter that life, there's a sentience, there's a acknowledgement from both souls or the multiple of souls. There's an agreement as to the work, the future work, even though you're in this tesseract of nothingness as far as and space is concerned, there's an agreement that, I'm going to cause this trauma to you. It brings up the whole concept of karma. And that is key because that gives people, I've seen it give people tremendous strength in therapy to find value and meaning of stuff that's happened to them that they feel they're just a victim of. And it's kind of like, no, on an unconscious level, your God, your higher self, your soul, your reincarnated soul has agreed to this to come here and to learn these lessons. That's part of the one of the cool things about the soul trauma healing as opposed to past life regression. Past life regression is sort of like a glimpse inward, whereas the soul trauma healing is this acknowledgement of a breath in, breath out, awareness to unawareness, subconscious to conscious, spiritual to sentient.
Well, that's why we're calling it all non-ordinary mind.
I like that.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross told this great story. She was famous for being the person who wrote about grief, death, and dying. But she later, in her life, became very, very spiritual. And apparently, her mother had had a stroke and was lived as a vegetable for about 3 or 4 years. And um, so her mother finally passed, and Kubler-Ross is in her meditation, and her guide comes to her and says, "You're troubled, my dear." You know how they talk. "You're troubled, my dear. What's the trouble?" And she says, "Well, it's your boss." Really? "Yes. My mother was the kindest, nicest, sweetest person in the universe. She just asked for one thing, to not be a burden at the end of her life. And your boss let her live as a vegetable for 3 years and be a total burden on everything." Well, the guide goes, "Well, you don't understand. That was a gift to her." "Gift? What are you talking about?" "Well, you see, she didn't know how to receive. And in those 3 years, she learned how to receive. Now she doesn't have to come back as someone who's crippled or mentally retarded and has to receive." I thought that was pretty interesting, that
I
idea.
love that. I love that. I think one of my favorite shows was the past life regression. Well, I guess it was soul trauma healing with Alyssa. That was one of my favorite because the level of questions that we asked of her and that we can ask of her, and I'd encourage people to go back and watch that, was really astounding, especially when we start talking about soul fragmentation, soul
Hmm.
retrieval. Can a soul inhabit more than one body on the same planet simultaneously if it's able to fragment and do this and that? The She's really explains it in a way that I think anyone can understand, and
Well,
it's
I
very
think
cathartic.
that, we want to, and I think she did this as well. We want to inspire people to investigate this stuff and not to just judge it. "Oh, well, you're
Or
crazy."
just believe it. On the other
Believe
hand,
it,
not
disbelieve it,
just
I don't
believe it.
care. Just take a look.
Yeah.
The anecdotal evidence on reincarnation is overwhelming. Just overwhelming. And there are actual studies like Dr. Stevenson studies that are scientific. But the anecdote, I mean, if science is about observing, it's overwhelming. So for me, these things are facts that we're talking about. We could look at them as metaphors. And yeah, I didn't get an address and a phone number I could look up on any of those lifetimes. But man, I could tell you what I was wearing. My imagination isn't that good,
Mm.
And the other thing that I thought was pretty interesting to me was when I didn't really know anything about Atlantis or the legends of Atlantis when I had that regression. And I actually had 12 different regressions to Atlantis with a science fiction story that came out of it. Well, several years later, I started reading Edgar Casey, and he talked a lot about Atlantis. One of his stories was dot for dot the one that I had come up with. Um, and I remember reading it and being stunned by how close the story that he was relating was to the one that I actually experienced. So more to heaven and earth, so to speak.
what are your thoughts on, or do you remember talking with Alyssa about soul fragmentation
Sure.
and retrieval? Okay. Because that's an interesting, important concept too. I mean, I'm a mechanism guy. I like having things explained to me um, in some sort of way that to connect it. And
I
soul
say it's just a
fragmentation,
mystery, right?
huh?
What I say, oh, it's a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah, you just like the mystery.
I embrace the mystery. I like it that you want to explain. It makes us like the frickin' frack of non-ordinary mind, you know.
We're not allowed to say click and clack.
I didn't say click and clack.
I know we're not allowed to say that. I don't know.
Well, I
Did I
said
just get us?
frickin' frack.
Did I just get us sued?
Not yet. Maybe in the future.
Oh man. Well, so soul
I think they're I
fragmentation.
think they're dead anyway, so don't worry about it.
Both of them?
Well, maybe not. We
I'm
could
sure
look
they
it up.
have people that still will sue us.
Okay.
Let's hope we get that big. Mom, make sure you hit the like and subscribe and sub and friend, follow, whatever. So soul fragmentation is not allowing the normal balancing of a trauma of event, a birth, a death. There's a hiccup, there's a hang up. And when the soul gets fragmented, a piece gets caught in the past, whether that's the Bardo plane or the previous life, or maybe that piece went on into another soul in another life. Um, you feel the person feels as if they're lost or something is off. A lot of times they'll say, "I feel like part of me is missing." That's a weird thing to say. If you can count your fingers and toes, I feel out of balance. I feel ungrounded. Those are the types of things that a fragmented soul. And we work, I think, with several people that qualify very well for this. And then the process of the healer, someone like Alyssa as well, is retrieving and integrating, finding, identifying, retrieving, and integrating, I guess, that missing soul piece, that fragment, which, and you've seen this, and this is one of the most remarkable things that comes out of your work with Sam, is it improves physical limitations, emotional imbalances, physical health, anxiety, other issues which can be potentially healed vibrationally.
I always felt that karma, which is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about past lives, was sort of a spiritual post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, kind of is unresolved trauma. And usually when we do a past life regression, that's connected to a psychological or some emotional symptom. I don't know why anybody else would do it. You know, it's you get a bigger bang for your buck going to the movies. But it's almost invariably some kind of terrible trauma, either a death scene that people are going through or losing someone very close to them
Yeah.
traumatically. I did have a patient who used to freak out if she'd go into the movie theater. You know, they have those red carpets, and you know, by the where you buy your candy,
Yeah.
and she couldn't go in a movie theater. Well, she said, "Well, do you think you could help me?" I said, "I don't know. We'll try." She went right back to Gettysburg during the Civil War, and the blood all over the hospital floor. Well, it was really a makeshift hospital in in the battlefield, but the blood all over the place was what triggered her. When we processed that, she was able to go to the movie theater the next week.
So what does that look like? The processing or the retrieval or the reintegration? What does that look
Well,
like?
okay, like any other psychotherapy, you know, you're making the unconscious conscious. Then you're dealing with emotions in real time, so you get an expression. With this woman, basically, you as the therapist, you have to have faith that the unconscious is going to take you to the point of origin of the symptoms. So what I do when I'm doing this is the person gets into, it doesn't have to be a deep trance. A light trance is usually enough. So, okay, once they're in that trance and they could be walking down a long hallway with many doors, they could be in a movie theater, whatever it is, whatever metaphor the patient wants to use. And then you say, subconscious mind, I want you to take me to the point of origin of this symptom. And we usually get something. With this woman, it was profound. She was immediately went right to the battlefield.
Hmm.
And I just, it's this is the kind of thing, it's simple but not easy, because you have to have, you can't really disturb what's going on. You have to sort of facilitate it. So there's a lot of what happened next? What happened next? How did you feel about that? And then when the final death scene occurs, what advice do you have for this person in their current functioning? Well, this particular woman, and I think I wrote about it in my book, she didn't need a lot of advice. She just needed to know where it was coming from. And then she could go to the movie theater and say, well, that's not blood. So, if you were a medic in the war, you could have the same experience. It didn't have to be the Civil War. It could have been, in Afghanistan. And then you go in and you see red and you get activated. But the idea was that I thought it was so interesting that it came from a past lifetime, and the woman got activated as if it were in the present.
You have some really complicated cases in that I feel like these souls or the fragments, I'm sorry, the traumas or the fragments are layered on top
Oh
of each
yeah,
other.
absolutely.
But I kind of feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's usually for most people like one biggie that is left unresolved. Not one big thing to happen to them in their lifetime, but one big thing that they really kind of get stuck on. And then as you do the integration, or the fragments are cleared or returned or reintegrated, it's amazing to me, like overnight it's like a spiritual aha moment, or I forget what they call that in religious parlance, but
Aha's good.
grace or serendipity or something. And that or like a near death experience, they'll say, hey, I feel very different, my body feels different, I feel different in my body, or this is the first time I felt present or whole within my body in a long time.
Yeah, I
Those are
get lighter
unusual
a
things
lot.
we never hear.
Yeah, I get lighter. People
Ordinarily
say I'm lighter. Um,
lighter, the energy's better. Some people, I don't know, can you carry around dark soul fragments, other soul fragments? I think you and
why
I
not?
part a little bit on that.
Why not? I mean, look, the human experience is based on balances between light and dark. You have inhale, you have exhale.
Yin
You know,
yang.
you have day, you have night. Our experience is a dialectic between opposites and how we balance everything. So why wouldn't we have lifetimes where we were um, not the nicest of people? It's funny because I knew this really wonderful psychic, rest in peace. She's been gone for quite some time. Well, she gave me the privilege of helping her prepare for death because she was scared of death. What it turned out was that she was burned at the stake in the Salem witch trials. And according to her, guess who the judge was?
Wow.
But I had never
That's
seen that in
heavy.
any of my past lives. But so it was like it was allowing me to help to to by helping her this time, I worked
Great.
out some of the karma. And while I had never seen this lifetime, it made perfect sense to me. I think about I have over 50,000 clinical hours now in my career. And I say, well, what did I do to sign up for this? You know? And I don't know, except this was my path from the time that I was a kid, and so the idea of karma, I look at it as a river that it can go in several different directions, but not infinite numbers of directions
Do
that
you
are. Go ahead.
do you think that I'm interested in kind of that moment where someone realizes this may be an issue going on with them, or someone remembers or identifies or has a flashback or some experience that brings them to this line of thinking, or more pragmatically brings them into your office, right? There's a moment where it change, an ingredient is required to change the dynamics, to change the mechanism of um, the whole process of action, trauma, you know, soul fragmentation, whatever, and healing and reintegration. There's something in the middle that's really critical, and that's that person's intention. Like the great Pink Floyd says, the soul's intention is learning to fly, right? In this case, the soul's intention is the actual healing hand. It's the thing that directs you to help them. It's the thing that says it's sort of like the first step is to AA. That intention to heal is necessary.
Well, I really believe that the body, the soul, we're programmed to heal. I mean, this is hardwired into us. Things get in the way, and we sort of assume that positive experience are going to heal us. I don't think that's so true. I mean, think about it. I mean, there was somebody who was really mean to me about my singing, so I got singing lessons, and now I sing a lot better. Now, I could have gone into a hole and quit singing, never sung again. It's a real, simple example that how you respond to the challenge is really how you work the karma out. So let's say
Yeah.
you, and I don't think karma is like, well, I killed you, so you have to kill me.
No, it's not a malevolent. It's
And
a it's a balancing.
it's more like weather systems than a bank account.
Right.
Like this thing
Natural.
affects that thing affects that thing affects that thing affects. And then it comes around that you have some choices to make in terms of your own spiritual growth.
I mean, there's no doubt that our non-physical soul energy, whatever you want to call it, unconditionally loves us, and it's conspiring in our favor for our highest good, our well-being, happiness, success in every way. But you can hold the hand of this work, and I think pass through it so much faster and easier with that intention of healing. Because I you use the word sad. If someone criticized your singing, that's putting a value judgment on it.
Oh,
There is
that's how I actually got sad, but I also got irritated, and it motivated me to get off my butt and get some lessons because I wanted to do
but there
this.
is no good or bad, there just is.
Well, I know that my singing got a lot better with the lessons, is all I can tell you. Um, and I'm grateful. See, that to me is the bottom line. There are people who come in our lives and they may not be nicey, and yet they can get us to places that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
You could say that three more times. I think that's such an important concept and statement. And valuing, acknowledging. One of the things in AA is because alcoholics really struggle with the most toxic emotion, which is anger and rage, which is ultimately based out of fear. But what they tell you to do, if you're really pissed off at this person, your jilted paramour, or your dead, parent, or whatever, pray for them.
Right.
And by prayer, they mean set that intention out there, that you thank them for those teachings and the
Right.
bumps and the bruises.
And you said something that I think is really spot on. The ingredient that's needed at that point is an experience. You need an experience both to feel it and maybe to explain it as well. Explaining it to yourself. Well, how could I be in this spot? Or how could that person have hurt me the way they did? Or whatever you're looking at.
Why does this keep happening to me? Ding, ding, ding,
Exactly.
ding,
Oh,
ding.
that sounds good. Yeah, exactly. And when you have an explanation, it makes it easier to move through it. It allows you to live in your own power, which, most people don't realize that that's a conscious choice to live in their own power, but they may not do it for unconscious reasons. And
They
and
usually
once
do it
again,
for unconscious
it
reasons.
could be, your toilet training. It could be your lifetime, on Easter Island. It could be a lot of things, but it's probably not that they ran out of French fries at McDonald's or whatever you got mad about. Um,
Well, what if you murdered someone? That might create an indelible trauma that has to be worked out in a future life.
No doubt. Well, the stuff that I would encounter in doing many of these past life experiences, and it was something it was usually around death, usually the person's death or things they did in that lifetime that they regretted, like murdering. Um, but the way that I would do past life regression therapy was very much the way you describe soul trauma healing. So I'm gonna go for whatever that trauma was and help them process it. So it sounds really connected. And I've known shamans, and I've been in meetings with shamans where they did soul retrieval. Um, it's not that different from the stuff you and I do with people. I mean, it's a different label. It's a different label on it, and if you believe that stuff, it works. But I mean, I just call it psychotherapy and help people express themselves and happy, healthy, and productive. That's my mantra when people come to see me. I don't have to be politically correct or psychologically correct. However they get there is fine, as long as they get the result that they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's the message of this, the power of this therapy in general. Like you said, not so much to reject or totally believe on faith, pun intended, as it were. These are real therapeutic, powerful therapeutic tools, um, and right up the alley for non-ordinary mind. Which reminds me, next week we got to. Why is it we're having like awesome show after awesome show? Because every one of
Well,
these topics is just
well,
a
I
lot
can
of
tell you
fun.
why, because you think of them. That's why.
Well, we brainstormed, and I get a lot of feedback from the watchers, from our alt psych heads.
Ooh, that's a good name for them.
Honestly, I don't think anyone's ever written anything. So somebody
Well,
write something, man. Next
well,
week,
next
it's
week.
going to be subliminal messages
Ooh.
and automatisms. Not automatons, automatisms.
Live long, prosper.
That's not an automatism, but I like it too.
Live
Peace and long
long,
life.
prosper. I guess, yeah.
Peace and long life. Nanu, nanu.
Well, he had it down. Okie dokie,
I need
Smoke.
2 people for that.
So until then,
Until next week, this was fun. Oh, no. Be well. 3.
2,
Be well.
1.
Be
Be
well.
well.
Be well.
Be well.
Until next time.
Bye.